So firstly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce you to the person responsible for creating the Sinnott Fellowship. Lucy Parker headed up the Talent and Enterprise Task Force at what was previously the Department for Children, Schools and Families. And this work was just one of many of her groundbreaking projects. She's recently founded Blaise Projects, which focuses on the social role of business. So do please, ladies and gentlemen, give Lucy Parker a very warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I think it is a real joy to be here this morning. Not just, I'm delighted to be here. I mean, it's a real joy, because what it is that everybody in this room is doing is what we all need. And there are precious moments when we can be together and share things. And the energy and the commitment and the excitement and the innovation that every single one of you and your schools represent is, I think, just nothing short of inspirational. So for me, it's a great joy to be here. Those of you who have had children, and I think if you haven't had children, you've certainly looked after many children, will know that when they're little, they seem to ask for the same stories again and again and again. And, you know, if you've been married a long time, you tell the same stories again and again, people say. So when I was thinking, what shall I say this morning? I thought, oh dear, I'm going to say the same stories. And then I thought, well, maybe it doesn't matter, because if your kids and your partners and so on occasionally put up with you telling the same stories, maybe this is a moment to tell the same story, to go back to the beginning and say, why did we do this? So many of you will have heard me say some of this before. And then there are others who are partners and leaders in your schools who are with you here who may not have heard it before. So I will rebase us back to the beginning. Why did we do this? Well, when I was really lucky and given the opportunity to be the chair of the Talent and Enterprise Task Force, I was given a brief to look at what could happen to be catalytic to more people focused urgently on raising the skills base and the talent base in this country in the context of the new global economy. That was the brief. And when I was out and about in lots of schools and in lots of creative networks, I found, you know how sometimes impressions just sort of hit you and you think, oh, wait a second, this is a really important thing. I met a lot of teachers who were just brilliant at what they were doing. And when I asked them how they were doing this extraordinary work that was very often connecting the pupils to the outside, they would say rather apologetically, well, the thing is, I just think it's really important. And I mean, I know there isn't a role exactly, and I'm the only one, but that's what I'm doing. And when I'd heard this, I kid you not, about 10 times over a few weeks, I kept thinking, but they all think they're the only one. And that can't be right, because they're all onto something which is becoming really, really important. And I was working with Radhika Bainan, who was working with a sort of sister task force in the government, and we were looking for the collaborative project. And we hit upon the idea that maybe this thing, this groundswell of really innovative, imaginative work, which you all represent, is a very important frontline movement in education. Why frontline? Because it's not mandated. It's not mandated from the top or the centre or anywhere else. It's happening out of the imagination and commitment of teachers and schools who are noticing that connecting their students with the outside world is one of the most significant things they can do. So they do it anyway. They do it because they believe in it. And so we fantasized, Radhika and myself and a few others, that we could one day create a network of such people who would, by being a network, both reinforce and excite one another, but also help us to shine a light on this thing, which is an invisible but vital groundswell of energy in the education system. And you're it. I mean, that is completely magic. So we dreamt it up. Now, we do have to thank some people. You know, we wouldn't be here today without the work that Sophie's done to hold us together and to bring us together. And the Teaching Awards have been great allies and imaginative partners in making this happen, and thank you to everybody involved in that. One of the most important things we wanted to do was document the work, not to test or assess or crack the whip over the people who were the Sinnott Fellows, but to record it, to show it, to shine a light on it, to measure how significant it is in order that we could tell others. and the Institute of Education and Sarah's work has been and will be very important in doing that. Of course, the National Union of Teachers was very important, and John Bangs is here with us this morning, which is fantastic, and the Institute of Education and the NUT have been very significant in bringing the spirit of the thing alive. Why did we all bother in the first place, disadvantaged young people? And then, of course, the SSAT, who are great partners to the task force work, and Brenda's with us, have been really the relationship which will allow it to go forwards. And so I'm delighted that suddenly we find Sarah and John are working closer together, Radhika and Brenda are working closer together, but the SSAT has been vital in bringing a spotlight to this work and also to wrapping some of the principles and ideas and inspiration that you all bring into the outward-facing work they're doing anyway and finding partners for it. So thank you. But let's come back to the fellows. The point was to identify and select people who were doing really remarkable work. And you all do really remarkable work. In fact, when we gathered some of us together at the SSAT in partnership with the SSAT earlier this year, and Liz Reed, the Chief Executive of the SSAT, met someone, was sitting beside me, and she said, this is just a Vesuvius of ideas. So, although it's correct, you're here to learn from each other, actually you're here to share with each other. I mean, you are an inspiration to anybody you meet, and you should be a network to inspire one another. There is a Vesuvius of ideas in the people in this room. What you share, I think, what we all share, is a belief that connecting students with the outside world, the world outside the gates of the institution they study in, matters. I think there are lots of ways in which it matters, but there are two very important ways. One is, it's the catalyst to understanding that education is connected to real life. Now, I know you all know that, but there are many, many people, students in schools and colleges, who don't know that, do they? And certainly when I was in the task force, if I had one dominant impression of what was dangerous to the system, is the disconnect between the classroom and the real world. It was, if you were in a helicopter shot of the country and it was a radar screen, what you saw was bleep, 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 whenever there was that divide. It is a disaster when it happens. And it's a disaster because the students don't know why they're in the schools can't connect them to work afterwards, and they get lost. Lives get lost. So that connection between the classroom and the real world was what we were trying to highlight. Also, of course, though we worked really hard to make sure that we were not only giving this fellowship into schools that can be called disadvantaged schools, of course, for schools which are in disadvantaged areas and so forth, there isn't a natural infrastructure to help students do that. So teachers and schools being able to do that is a real force for growth in those individuals' lives. It can change lives. It is shorthanded into social mobility and so on, but it changes lives. So I think that connection really matters. It's always mattered, but the second reason it matters is that it matters more today than it's ever mattered. And I'm not exaggerating. If I go back to why was the task force there in the first place, the fact of the matter is that in this last 10 years, the ground has changed under our feet in this country. And most people living in this country don't actually know that much about it. And the fact of the matter is that the new global economy has changed the ground under our feet. And what that means, actually, is that the jobs which in our generation, I'm amongst the older of the older, but we're all of an older than school generation. The jobs that used to be what sustained this country, the businesses that used to provide the growth that funded the education system, the opportunities for work once you left school and started to join the adult workforce and make your own life, have changed, radically changed. And there are communities, and the current recession is reinforcing it, there are communities where we have to ask ourselves, what are our kids going to grow up doing? And what that means is we have to invent new jobs. We have to invent new industries. I mean, it's really exciting. It's really exciting. A bit scary, but it's really exciting. And the forces that are changing the way we operate in this country are global. So when you think to yourself, well, actually the project I'm particularly doing in a school is introducing people to a club down the road or a small business down the road, that doesn't sound like it's about the global economy. In my view, it absolutely is. For kids to understand that their school, that their studies, that their will-be working life is now operating in a world where the tentacles go around the world. And unless we can lift their eyes and put their eyes to a bigger horizon, we are disadvantaging them more than you can believe in their working lives, their grown-up lives. So for me, it is about raising aspirations, opening up horizons, and making people fit and equipped and strong enough to work in a world that's changed shape. So I think that what you're doing is essential as well as inspirational.